Day two of our study on the Scarlet Letter. Hopefully, you have read your Puritan Laws and Character supplemental material that I put on the Webster Parish portal. Or if you're just here to learn about the Scarlet Letter, you went to commonlit.org and you downloaded the reading. Also, I hope you have read through chapter 4, at least, of the Scarlet Letter, because that's what we're going to go over in tomorrow's lesson. If you don't have access to the text, you can find it for free online, or you can use the links that I provided. Go to youtube.com and listen to the audiobook, just like in The Great Gatsby. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over our Puritan character sheet reading, and then we're going to talk about the story of the Scarlet Letter. Be a relatively short lesson today. Before you get real in depth into the Scarlet Letter, and you really have to understand how these people thought and how they operated. And you got a little insight into that when we did Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God yesterday. However, that was just, a religious sermon, and in some church instances, they still have that quote-unquote hellfire and brimstone. But this article here talks about actual, their laws, their society, etc. Okay, so let's go through it. During the 17th century, the combined New England colonies formed practically, if we accept Rhode Island, one great Puritan commonwealth. They were under separate governments, but their aims and hopes, their laws, for the most part in their past history, were the same. They had a form of government referred to as a theocracy. That word basically, the beginning, theology is like religion. Study of religion. If you go to school to become a reverend, a preacher, a priest, whatever, study of theology. And then ocracy, that's government. Democracy. And so what that means is that God and the government were tied together. There was no separation of church and state, how we have in America and most countries today. There was no separation of church and state. God and government were intertwined, which means that morals were legislated to a extreme degree. The people as a whole were liberty-loving in the extreme, but the individual was restrained at every step by laws that no free people of today would tolerate for an hour. Paternalism in government was the rule in other colonies and in Europe, but nowhere was it carried to such an extreme as in New England. You could see that from if you've read part of the Scarlet Letter already, and also, just the mindset of the people from Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Here, the civil law laid its hand upon the citizen and his business and social relations. It regulated his religious affairs, it dictated his dress, and even invaded the home circle, directed his family relations. One law forbade, which means forbidden, the wearing of lace, another of slashed cloths, other than one slash in each sleeve and another in the back. The length and width of a lady's sleeve was solemnly decided by law. It was a penal offense, which means breaking the law, for a man to wear long hair. To smoke in the street, or for a youth to court a maid without the consent of her parents. This means go out with. Had to get consent to the parents. A man was not permitted to kiss his wife in public. No public displays of affection. Captain Kimball, returning from a 3 years ocean voyage, kissed his wife on his own doorstep and spent 2 hours in the stocks for his lewd and unseemly behavior. They were real serious about this stuff. That just seems extremely insane to us today. Stocks, we talked about it yesterday. Public humiliation, basically. Stocks refer to a device used in colonial America in which a person's legs, arms, and or head would be, they cut that part off, but they would be. And then they would be in like the town square, and it hurts, because they're there for hours, and your back has been over in a weird, awkward position, so it's painful, but then also it's humiliating. It's not excruciating or anything, but it's real sore, and it's just painful on the muscles. Most striking feature in the life of New England is found in its religion. The state was founded on religion, and religion was its life. The entire political, social, and industrial fabric was built upon religion. This is what I'm talking about theocracy. And then right here, it breathed air of legalism rather than of free grace, and received its inspiration from the Old Testament rather than the New. Now, we can't get into a big, long, discussion of Christianity or books of the Bible or anything like that, but there's a stark, just for the point of this, and for the study on the Scarlet Letter, the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament is very large. There's a stark difference between it. Whereas the Old Testament is very eye for an eye and sort of brutal-esque. The New Testament preaches love, and so the Puritans spent more in the Old Testament, the way of doing things, than in the New. Gleam of hope and truth in the charge of Mrs. Hutchinson. This is a reference to something that you already saw if you read the Scarlet Letter, that the Puritans lived under a covenant of works. This was because they had not fully grasped the whole truth of divine revelation. Let's skip on down here. Nevertheless, now this is the good stuff. This is some of the good stuff. Nevertheless, there is no more admirable character in history than the New England Puritan of the 17th century. His unswerving devotion to duty, his unlimited courage based on the fear of God, his love of liberty and hatred of tyranny, these are the qualities that have enthroned him in the memory of the American people. We deplore the narrowness and intolerance of the Puritans, but they were less narrow and tolerant than the English and most of the Europeans of that day. They committed errors, but they were willing to confess when they saw them. They banished Roger Williams as a disturber of the peace, not for his opinions, but they bore witness to his spotless character. They executed a few Quakers, and a Quaker is down there what it refers to. Quakers refer to a Christian sect known for their conservative and liberal ideals, as well as their personal study of religion and lack of hierarchical structures within the church. Just different denominations disliking other denominations, but confessed their error by repealing their own law. They fell into witchcraft delusion, which was prevalent throughout Christendom at the time, but they were first to see the dreadful blunder they had made, and they were not too proud to publicly confess it. Judge Sewell made before a large congregation a confession of his error, as only a hero could have done, and he begged the people to pray that God may not visit his sin upon him, his family, or the land. Such was the trait of the Puritan character that leads us to forget his faults and to admire rather than censure him. This is the story of the crucible, which is something that I thought to teach this summer, but because I teach it to juniors, but I'm not going to. I may make videos of it when we get back, but I don't want any of my students to see it and I want to teach them in person. This talks about New England developing, how people moved out, and this talks about the downfall, the lessening of the Puritan culture simply because we moved out away from it. America grew. The population at the opening of the Revolution reached nearly 700,000, about 300,000 of which was in Massachusetts, including Maine. Connecticut contained so and so, so and so and so. All right, let's go over our answers. Number 1, what is the author's main purpose in this passage? The answer is A, to expand upon Puritan religion, culture, law, and its historical impact on the American colonies. This is literally, I give this because I want students to understand how the Puritans thought, how they operated, what their society was like. It's important as we read Puritan this book that you understand where these people are coming from. Which of the following statements best summarizes the relationship between religion and law in Puritan New England? The answer is B. Law and religion were closely tied, as religious law heavily influenced legal practices and governing. Theocracy. Number 3, you got to pick 2 here. Which of the 2 of the following quotes best supports the answer? The answer is D and F. The state was founded on religion. Religion was its life, and no further proof of the legalistic tendencies of Puritan worship is needed than a glance at their own laws. Number 4, the answer is A. How does paragraph 7 contribute to the development of ideas? It explains how, despite their rigid laws and character, Puritans had some of the most positive characteristics and should be viewed favorably in American history. There's this false notion because of the Scarlet Letter and the way Hester is treated in it, and also the Salem witch trials, which, don't get me wrong, that was horrible. I mean, it's terrible. When I teach the Crucible, the students cannot believe that something like that actually happened. I have to continue to stress to them over and over and over again that it's not fiction, that this really happened. All right, number 5. But they did good things, is what I'm saying. They did real good things, which is what we talked about yesterday. Number 5, according to the text, what happened to the Puritans' influence in New England over time? We expanded. People moved away from Puritan New England, started settling other parts of the country, and their influence completely lessened the further away people got from them. It's no different than England and the king. The further people got away from the king, the less power he had. All right, down here, these opinion questions. Consider everything you've learned about the Puritans. What is your overall view or opinion of this group? That's just your opinion. We've talked about the good and the bad. What do you think about them? What values does modern America share with the Puritans? Okay, well, we already talked about hard work, public education, self-reliance, etc. Consider how different the modern U.S. is compared to the Puritan settlements of the 1600s. How do you think a Puritan from colonial America would respond to life in the U.S.? That's kind of like the old saying, the old scenario, what would happen if you brought a founding father to America today? Would they like it or would they disapprove of it? It's kind of similar here. All right, now let's actually talk about the Scarlet. Hopefully you should have already started reading the book. If you don't have access to it, we already talked about ways you can get it. And if you haven't just because you don't want to, hopefully by me explaining what the book is about now, you'll want to pick it up or check it out. So we're going to talk about what this book is about. So Nathaniel Hawthorne, one of the most famous and basically one of the founding fathers of American literature, wrote this novel. And again, it is the Scarlet Letter. All right, so again, A is the letter. Scarlet Letter. All right, so basically a big question. What happens when a private sin becomes a public crime? We talked about the Puritans legislating morals. So something that you do in the privacy of your own home that many consider to be sinful, not going to get into the nature of sin and morals and theology or anything like that, but in the purposes of the book, when a private sin becomes a public crime. Here's the story. In Puritan New England, and we talked about how these people are, through sinners in the hands of an angry God and Puritan character common live. In Puritan New England, a young woman named Hester Prynne gives birth to a baby girl. Hester's elderly husband has been missing for years, so everyone in the town knows that the husband is not the father. This is scandalous for New England. This is kind of scandalous for modern America. It was a real big deal back then. The town punishes Hester harshly for her adultery. That is what the Scarlet Letter is. Scarlet means red. So what they end up doing is what we're going to show. Originally, and there's beginning people in the beginning chapter, there's a lot of people who want her to be executed for this. Because they consider it to be adultery because her husband is missing and to them, he's not dead. They don't know where he is. They assume he's dead, but he's not dead. And so it's adultery in their eyes. Adultery is cheating. When you're married, it's cheating if you don't know what adultery is. So some of them were so whatever they wanted her to be killed. But the people in charge, they say, well, the dude's probably dead. The husband's probably dead, so we're not going to kill her. We're just going to punish her. First they imprison her. Then they condemn her to wear a scarlet letter A for the rest of her life. It's like a badge of shame. A lot of you have seen the movie Easy A with Emma something. I can't remember what her name is. Anyway, it's a movie that came out a few years ago, and it's extremely loosely based. It's just the premise of the movie. It's kind of similar around this. And so they make her wear this red letter A to where everyone can see it, and it's a badge of shame and public humiliation for the rest of her life. All right, so the townspeople treat Hester as an outcast. What her neighbors do not know is the identity of the baby's father because Hester refuses to tell. Hester will not tell who the father of the baby is. Her lover, whomever he is, seems to escape punishment, or does he? And this is the main underlying theme of the book. How does guilt affect a person? Conversely, how does going ahead and owning up to what you've done wrong affect a person, and how are they different? Perhaps hidden suffering is even worse than public shame. Persecuted in England, the Puritans came to North America to form their own communities. Life in the colonies was harsh, but it gave the Puritans the opportunity to form a society based on their religious ideals. Setting of the Scarlet Letter is Boston in the 1640s. So this is a long time before the American Revolution. It's the height of Puritanism. Boston had recently been founded by about 1,000 English Puritans led by a man named John Winthrop. Puritans sought the freedom to live by their beliefs. However, the Puritan leaders did not tolerate religious beliefs that differed from their own. As for personal freedom, every member of the community was held to strict standards of behaviors. In Puritan community, such as Hester's, no aspect of life was truly private, and people kept a close watch on their neighbors. Everybody was in everybody's business. Everybody was up in everybody's Kool-Aid, didn't know the flavor. Point is that everybody was busybodies, and everybody was watching their neighbors to see if their neighbors were up to no good. Those considered sinners were publicly and harshly punished as an example to others. This is a picture of the stocks, like I talked about. This is one of them that's like on display up in Puritan New England as a reminder of what was done. All right, so now some questions. We can't discuss this because we're not in a class, but just some things you can start on to think about. Hester goes to jail for an action that in our society usually would remain private. What kinds of wrongdoing do you think should be punished publicly, and what kinds should remain private for the people involved? Now, this is a completely open-ended question. We used to have public executions all the way up to relatively recent times. There's still like public shamings. It's not against the law. It's not against the law to bully somebody. It's not against the law to whatever. It doesn't make it right. But is there anything that's worth being shamed publicly? It's when someone commits a crime and they're arrested for it. It goes on television. Is that a public shaming? Is that all right? Should we not do that? And then what kind should remain private for the people involved? This was a relationship with Hester between consenting adults. Why should that be? It may be considered a sin from your own perspective, but what I consider a sin is not the same as what you consider a sin, etc. Was that right to be publicly shamed? Motivated by love and loyalty, Hester keeps a painful secret. What kinds of secrets should you keep? When might it be better to reveal a friend's secret even though that person will be angry with you? Are there secrets that some of your friends tell you that you should keep? What is that? Is that deeply personal? You don't want to ruin someone's confidence in you. And then the other one is, when might it be better to reveal a friend's secret even though that person will be angry with you? Is there a time when someone tells you something and maybe your best friend and they say don't tell anybody, but it's like something, you need to tell? Is it worth doing that to lose a friendship? Our lesson is going to be a common lit related to the first 4 chapters of the book. And we're going to talk a little bit more as we move forward of what's happened in these chapters so you can stay up with the novel and how it proceeds. So, if you have access to it, make sure you read the first 4 chapters before you come back. Until I see you again, it's a great day to be a warrior.